All right. Well, good afternoon. I was about to say good morning, but it's not morning anymore. I hope your week's going pretty well. Almost over, hopefully. So last week, geez, it's been a long week for me. So Monday, we went over some things in chapter 2, kind of reviewed stuff we did in chapter 1, and then we looked a little bit at like regression models. And I said, like, many of you haven't seen these before, and that's fine. So if the regression stuff was a little over your head because you haven't seen it before, that's fine. I'm not expecting you to, run regressions or really even understand them, but, sometimes it might be interesting to be able to see what a study is actually doing and see where these results are coming from instead of just reading them. So when we get to a study that has results like that, we can always go back and talk about the regression model a little bit more. So you have a reading assignment for Monday. You'll have a quiz, and this assignment or the paper is from Prescott, so it's on the chapter 3, module. I'm telling you that what's important. So this is a long paper, and I'm definitely not telling you should read the whole thing, but you should read section 1, the introduction. Section 2 gives a little bit of background. So this is on sex offender registry notification. So section 2 just gives you an idea of how states have started using this and their evolution. You can go through it. You don't need to know too much about that though, but it might give you some background. 3 is important up until the math. So this is a conceptual model. They're not really doing anything with numbers, but what's important would be to identify the variables being used. You don't need to know anything about the model, but really just identify those variables and how they relate to each other. So maybe you might have sex offender registry online, and then a notification system. Are they always together, or are they sometimes separate? That's the things you want to know. You can look at the beginning of section 4, which is the data section. Really just see where that data is coming from. Get an idea of how this study is gathering their data. If there's any problems or limitations with that data, and it's actually talked about in that section. Get an idea of how maybe large the study is. Is it in one state? Is it through the US or a couple states? Is it international? Get an idea for that, and also read the conclusion. So you won't have to read the results section, which goes through the actual model. The conclusion is section 7. So you're skipping 5 and 6. You don't need to know those things. But the conclusion just gives you an idea of roughly what they found without all of the math and the maybe more harder to understand stuff is what I'm trying to say. So I want you to be able to read this without getting too frustrated. So Monday, beginning of class, you will have a reading quiz for the first 15 minutes. It will probably be less than 10 minutes or 10 questions, just because this is only one paper. It's going to be very general, like we had for the other quiz. I will email you later tonight about these sections to remind you. So you'll have that in an email and an announcement. So that is for Monday. You should read that this weekend. And then I'm also assigning your first problem set. So if you go on to, I can share my screen maybe first. All right, so you go on to your Canvas. I'll show you student view. It's going to be under assignment. Right now, it's not available here until 3 p.m. I do it that way just so you're not starting the problem set already. But this is where you're going to upload it as well when you are, completed it. And this is due next Wednesday. So you have a whole week to complete it, due by class time to get it in. So I'll kind of go through some of the things. First of all, I should mention it's going to go through Turnitin like plagiarism check. I don't really suspect anybody's going to plagiarize, especially for these types of questions. But even if you're citing something from the paper, one of the papers, make sure you're putting where it's coming from. You may work together with another student, but you should each be submitting something on your own. So you can work together, but put these answers in your own words. Again, it's due on the 23rd by 2 p.m. on Canvas. When you upload it, also make sure that it actually opens, so I don't get this damaged, corrupt file or anything like that. So it's your responsibility to make sure it does open, and if it doesn't, you receive a 0 on it. If you need to hand it in late, I'll accept it till the next class, that Monday, the 28th. You'll have a 20% flat deduction, so it can be a couple days late or 1 day late, it'll still be 20%. But I won't accept any assignments after this because we'll be going over it. As I said, you're expected to submit your own assignment, but you can work together, cite everything, and then it's out of 35 points. So it's 3 questions, but 2 of them have multiple parts. So I don't think it's going to take that long. You'll have to, I think, upload it as I think you might be able to do it as a Google Doc or Word or PDF. It works as well. Do not email me this. It goes on Canvas, so it's all in one spot, and I don't have assignments all over the place. And I don't expect it to be, very long when you send it in. I'm not expecting pages, maybe a whole page to explain all this stuff typed out. All right, so you'll be able to see this fully at 3 p.m. under the assignments here. Is there any questions about that?
So you don't have a certain number of words for each question?
No, nothing like that. Just try to answer the question fully, and if it's a shorter answer, that's fine, as long as it's, actually, the whole answer, really.
And are they coming directly from the first 2 papers we read?
The 2 papers and also the chapters 1 and 2, like the notes.
Okay.
Right, is there any other questions? And I'll also email you, and I'll remind you about this too. All right, so going back to the chapter 2 PowerPoint, we're going to talk a little bit about the Grogger paper today. So this one was the more data-heavy paper, less conceptual than the Becker paper. This was done in 91, so it's, 30 years old or so. My brother was born in 91, so I feel really old thinking about that. Anyway, so I just have here, again, when you're looking at a paper, sometimes getting an idea of the size of the study is good. I might not always ask you to memorize it, how many individuals were in the study. I'm not going to ask you to memorize 14,000, but get an idea. This is a large study. It's not just 100 people. 14,000 a good amount. And it's individuals from California who were arrested once between 1984 and 86, so about 3 years. Can anyone remind us what the Grogger paper was actually attempting to find?
I think it was trying to see whether whether increased punishments or increased chance of being convicted had a greater effect on crime rates.
Right, that's correct. So it's about the deterrent effect. Is crime, more affected? Does it go down when the punishments are more severe, or when the chance of you getting caught is more severe? So of course, there's some limitations when you're talking about something like crime. One is when you're talking about, say, how much are people changing? Are they still engaging in criminal activity, but maybe they're being smarter and then not getting caught? Or are they just not doing any type of activity or some? So they use number of arrests for proxy for criminal activity. And I have a question here, issues, as I just said, like obviously not everyone gets caught. You know, people might actually be engaging in more activity, but they're smarter and can get away from the cops more. They're, I don't know, doing something that's not as obvious now compared to what they were doing. So it's, you know, it's a little bit of a problem getting that, because it's not actually criminal activity, it's just a proxy. All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about different parts of this. One part is going to be this table. So what I'm going to do, so go over here. I have a slideshow that I'm going to share with you. I'm going to ask everyone to get the link in the chat. Yeah, you can get on here. And I'm going to break everyone up into groups on Zoom. It's in random. And as you know, I think it says what group you're in, like group 1 or 2 or 3, or room. If it doesn't say that, your group can just grab one of these, put your names on it so I can see that you're working, and try answering these 4 questions together. So it's about that grogger paper. And then we're going to go over these. So I'll probably give you maybe 10 minutes or so, and I'll pop in and out of some of these groups as I see you working. But then I can see, you know, you guys, how you guys are thinking about this paper. So let me break you up. Okay, and I'll see you back in about 10 minutes or so. Good. So this activity is just to have you guys answer some of these questions. I can see pretty much in real time as you're answering this, you know, how fast you're answering it, if you know these answers, if you don't. And it's fine that not everybody got all of these answers. That's okay. Let me share the screen. We're going to answer all of these. I'm going to ask one person from just each group to tell me. It's just going to be part of the question. You don't have to tell me everything. There might have been some issues with the rooms or something, and that's okay too.
I'm so sorry, room 3.
Is that you? Is that down here, or?
We were in room 4, and then we started typing in room 3, and I'm just so sorry.
Sorry.
I probably just made it difficult for everyone.
All right, no problem. All right, well, someone from room 1, maybe tell me what the dependent variables were in the study.
So for the dependent variable, we found that acronym NARR86, the number of times an individual was arrested.
Mm-hmm. So are you like repeating of the offenses? Was there any other dependent variable at all throughout the study? Like this for everyone?
Yeah, so that's like right before we left the breakout room. We were looking at a few of the variables that we have listed as independent, I think are actually dependent up until average sentence, because he used that NAR86 and then those other ones that start with N. They're different felonies, whether it's property felony or like misdemeanors and stuff. So I think up until the average sentence there, those should be on dependent.
Right, and even the average sentence, because the average sentence is going to give you an idea of the severity, right? So remember, the study is looking at the probability you get caught. So how many times you're arrested for this crime matter, or is it more about the severity? So the prison sentence you're going to be given. So all of those would be the dependent variables. And yeah, they broke it down. So they have these, and all these 86 numbers, and it was just representing what type of crime. So, you know, the idea is, are you arrested, and the average prison length. Will someone from room 2 talk about the independent variables?
The independent variables were whether or not we're changing the chance of conviction or the chance of the punishment, changing the punishment severity, whereas the severity of punishment didn't have a great effect on on a change in the crime rate. Changing the conviction odds had a much larger effect.
Were there any other independent variables that were added?
Maybe. I probably shouldn't have been the one to speak up because I'm quite tired and
Okay.
out of it today.
Well, anybody else just in the group or all together in the class? Is there any other independent variables? So they also looked at like some demographic variables like race and age, and also their employment. So are they working, unemployed, and how much they're earning as well. That'll go to the independent. All right, maybe someone from the white group, we'll call it, the white background group, maybe talk about this table 1. So I'll bring up that table here.
So it was just basically showing like the arrests in like the particular age group compared with like how much they earned.
Right, so you know, this is per 100th person, so kind of like an average, or not even an average, but like looking at just subgroups of the entire population of their study. So these are criminals, right? What kind of trend does this table show? Like, why might this be important?
Yeah, I think it shows a positive trend. It shows as the age rises, so does the pretty much arrest per person. Actually, in some ways it does. It kind of rises and then tails off as, you know, people earn that extra money. The likelihood of them committing the crime kind of tails off because they're earning that money so they don't have to commit crimes.
Yeah, that's right. So, you know, 19, we kind of peak at our arrest. This is at 45. And our income's pretty low. Remember, this is $1980, so it looks a lot lower than it actually is. But, you know, we're 19, we're dumb, we're stupid, we're making mistakes. But as we get older, our arrest rates start to go down, 39, 38. This is almost exactly going down. We're staying straight and then going down to 31 at the end. But throughout this time, our income is also increasing. So we may be substituting our, you know, activities that are more criminal for more legitimate activities, actually going to work and making money. What might this, as I'm putting this out there, what might this mean policy-wise? Like, if we wanted to, first of all, like reduce crime altogether through any age group, maybe when should we start trying to do that, looking at criminals?
I mean, from a policy standpoint, you could increase minimum wage. Whether I agree with that or disagree with that politically, it's a different story. But if you rose minimum wage to double minimum wage, you could get McDonald's for $7 an hour or something like that. Likelihood of committing a crime is less.
Yeah, definitely. So if you can have better opportunities somewhere else, that could lower the crime rate. Good. Is there anything else you might think about?
Maybe policy geared toward, like targeted towards young children that are in like the like juvies and stuff that are like at risk for like as soon as they enter the like 18, then they'd be part of this statistic. So maybe targeting a younger demographic with policy.
Yes, I was thinking of that as well. And there is a quote, I don't think I have it like, copied, but I have it in my notes. They said something along the lines of that. I think this is toward the end, using penal efforts directed at less experienced offenders. So younger people who maybe have 1 arrest instead of 10 arrests already. Maybe their like sentence, their prison or their punishment, make it more non-prison, make it geared toward employment. So they're learning maybe a skill, something that's going to enhance their earnings legitimately, or sanctions that aren't as severe. Because as you go to prison, there's a few things that happen. First of all, it's hard to get a job once you're out, right? If you have that record. Another problem might be the idea that you go to prison and you learn all these tricks that other criminals do, and you make friends with criminals. And maybe, being in prison is going to make you a better or a bigger criminal once you get out, because you have all these connections and you get all these ideas. So that, might not be great to send kids, younger people, to prison if that's the case. So that's an idea. All right, so that's 2. Someone in room 3, in the yellow, tell me about what type of data is used. Okay, well, someone was lurking here because his answer is correct. This cross-sectional data is the name of the type of data used. It's also called longitudinal data. So that was, both of those are in the paper somewhere. Outside of the paper, this type of data is also called panel data. So it has all these different names, but it's just describing the same type of data set. Now, what this is we're going to follow individuals. We don't really put their names down, but we look at, Felix, and we watch him through time. Does he get arrested in this year? How many times? How long do they go to prison? So we're following the same individuals over time. And that's what is called cross-sectional, panel data, or longitudinal. So all of this is the same. Okay, how about someone in room 4 talk about one of the findings, just one. These are really low stakes answers, guys.
All right. Grager concluded that like the certainty being punished is more effective than the harshness of punishment.
Yeah, definitely. So that was, answering the big question, that the certainty of your punishment is going to be a bigger deterrent. Good. How about someone from room 5? What was a finding?
We saw that. Go ahead, Matt.
I said that greater employment is associated with lower levels of arrest.
Yeah, that's right. So again, the idea is you're doing something else legitimately and you're not getting arrested or doing criminal activities. And how about someone from room 6?
That spells of joblessness were connected with more criminal activity.
That is right. How are they connected though? Like positively, right?
Yeah. More
Right.
unemployment meant more criminal activity.
Yeah, so if you can't get a job and you're bored or you're upset, you're more likely to, or the arrest rates are going to be higher for you. You might be doing more crime. There's also something about Black and Hispanic people are arrested more often than white people, and a few others. You know, I'm not saying you needed every different part of this, so they only asked for 3. And this study kind of packed a lot, and it was only like 13 pages. So don't always look at the page number and say, oh, you know, like this is 37 pages, it's gonna be so hard compared to like this 13. This 13-page paper had a lot in it. But this is good. We got through some big things here that we wanted to talk about. What are the variables? I gave you this one table, but then, you know, thinking about what the data is and also the findings. These are things you're probably going to want to look for in almost every paper we go through. Great. All right. So I'm going to have some notes on here that I'll write down later. So now we're going to just talk about, one, we're going to talk about an issue when we are modeling like crime. And we're going to look at a few different ways to solve this. And we're going to talk about some papers. So the next part of this chapter, I have like references to certain papers. This is from your book. You don't need to know these papers or anything, but I just want to talk about what they did really. Because some of it is kind of like unique, and you'll see why. All right, so if we are a town or we're a police department and we see that crime is rising, one of our probably like knee-jerk reactions is to hire more police. That's, you know, kind of pretty standard. So we know that police are going to apprehend criminals and just their presence is going to deter crime. So, you know, if there's a police officer standing on the corner, you're not going to rob somebody in front of them, more than likely. So we would probably believe that more police leads to less crime. And that's a pretty good, you know, thing to believe or to hypothesize. But if we want to think about this just empirically, so trying to see this relationship through data, we might have an issue. So in italics, I have more crime leads to the hiring of more cops, and then the hiring of more cops leads to less crime. So we have this weird reverse causation. And because of that, depending on how we look at our, you know, time period, or maybe our study might not be just well thought out, we might actually find that maybe more cops lead to more crime, or that we hire more cops when there's less crime, something like that, that doesn't make much sense. So we have to really distinguish between these effects. So there's more crime and then more cops, but then more cops and less crime. We have to kind of detangle these two variables. One way to do that is to find independently some reason why maybe the size of the police force is changing that is independent of the crime rate. So crime rate isn't going into that change in police numbers. So if we're increasing it, it's not due to the crime rate. So one researcher, this is Levitt in '97. Stephen Levitt does the Freakonomics books and the podcasts and things like that. So one thing that he did, he's looking at police hiring in 59 cities through the sample period, but he's looking at it during mayoral or gubernatorial, so governor elections. And the idea is maybe when mayors or governors are looking to get reelected, they might want to look like they're being tough on crime. So, you know, they're like, even if the crime's not changing or it's not too bad, we're going to hire more cops and, you know, make sure the streets are safe, and I can do that for you because I'm already in office. So that's what these incumbent candidates can do. So during these times, if they raise the police force, the numbers, and that doesn't depend on the amount of crime, then we might be able to identify a relationship. This study at the time did find that more police does lower crime, but there was an issue with some of the identification here. So then it was like resubmitted and things like that. So we'll say like their results are a little mixed, but I think this is an interesting way to think about that reverse causation and how to solve it. Corman and Machin in 2000. Now they're thinking, we know that when town or whatever wants to hire police, it can't happen just overnight. We have to first of all get a budget for that. We might have to get, we might have to like put a proposal in and get that approved. We have to train them. We're not just going to take people off the street. So it takes time. So what they did was use this high frequency data. So instead of looking at maybe arrest and crime rate during a year, they're looking at it monthly, as opposed to or quarterly or annually. So if it's taking time to get cops to be trained and hired and all of that, then basically the monthly data is just going to pick up any changes from that police activity and crime. A little hard to say. So what they believe is just that the monthly data doesn't allow enough time for crime rates to affect the size of the police force. So like our crime rate in September isn't going to lead to more police officers until November. So if we have a change in our police force in September, that was due to something else. So we just have this increase, not because of our crime rate right now. The study does find that an increase in the police force does reduce certain crimes like robbery. So that's their result. So another one, again, we're thinking of ways to look at increased like police officers that they're coming without being due to this increase in crime or a change in the crime rate. So this paper, I don't even have a name on here, I'm sorry, I'm bad citer too. But this looked at terrorist attacks in London, like stabbings and small bombings. During this time, when you have a terrorist attack, or a few of them, you're gonna put a lot of cops on the street, again, trying to deter this type of activity. So now we have a lot of police presence. That was only due to these few attacks, maybe even one attack. It wasn't due to the local crime rate. So we want to see if their presence affects the crime rate though. So they did find that the additional police led to less crime. But another thing to consider is, first of all, if you, I don't know, let's talk about a city. We're living in Philadelphia and we want to rob cars, we want to rob houses, whatever, but the Philly mayor starts putting more cops on the street. If that's the case, do we decide to maybe go to Camden, go somewhere else to steal? Are we just being displaced? And this is called geographical displacement. So are we going somewhere else that has less police instead of just Philly? If that's the case, well, Philly's doing better, but other places aren't doing better. And I use car theft here just as an example. It doesn't have to be car theft, just any crime. And then another possibility is that maybe we know this increased police presence is just temporary because there's this, terrorist attack, say. So we know, we're pretty sure, after a few months, they're going to stop being on the street. maybe we'll just wait those months out, and once they leave, we're gonna, rob a bunch of cars. This is called temporal displacement. So instead of doing all the crime today, we're going to do it in the future. It's deterring us now, but it's not overall deterring us. And so if we have these displacements, well, it's great for maybe a time period or a small area, but it's not great in the overall picture. So those are the big ones about police officers and crime and how to solve that reverse causation. Talk about a few other studies, just kind of give you an idea of other studies out there that, have been finding different things. This is on police spending on military equipment. So this 1033 program allows departments to buy surplus military equipment. And you can do that for, you buy them for really cheap. I think it's like free. You just have to get the equipment or whatever over to your police department. So it's really cheap to do. And so, if stuff's available, cops or police departments can request these things. This is, in this time period, 6 years, there was 176,000 equipment transfers within 8,000 police departments. So they found that having more military equipment in an area for these, policing purposes, the local police purposes, it does reduce crime rates. So this is a pretty quantitatively, they found that 10% increase in spending on the equipment, so about $5,800, not a lot of money, leads to a approximately $112,000 reduction in crime costs, from like motor vehicle theft, robberies, and such. So, you spend $6,000, but you save locally $100,000. But what's more important is the use of this equipment is found to possibly lead to a reduction of the number of officers being hired. So we might think that this, equipment, all these things, they might be substitutes for actual police officers. So can we use one instead of the other? And we might want to consider, the overall cost of having a piece of equipment versus a cop for, so many years with a pension and everything. So that's one thing to, policy to think about. I think this is the last one, second to last one. I'm sorry, I'm just like kind of reading these. But again, just to get an idea of what kind of research is out there as well, we're going to be doing a policy project. And, I don't want everybody to do, just the same type of projects. Get an idea of what else is out there, and you might be interested in some of these. So this study is about the use of IT. So they define IT in the form of personal computers, mobile computers, and mainframes. So when they looked at the study in '87, approximately only like 20% of police agencies used it, a while ago. By 2000, it was used in over 90% of the agencies, which still seems pretty low, but whatever. But what they found actually was that this having better IT, so more computers, faster computers, that doesn't actually lead to increases in their clearance rates or reduction in crime. Can anyone think of why that might be? We get faster computers, maybe faster cars, but it ends up not affecting how much crime is in an area.
Well, technology for everyone else also got better too. So it kind of like evens out.
That's true. And the idea here too, in addition, is that you also have to train people. in this technology. So, 2000 was still an early time for cell phones. Not everyone even personally had one. Obviously, not even cops had it. Well, not all cops had one for, work purposes. So we have to be able to train these cops in using these the best way so that they can work complementary to one another. This is a complementary hypothesis. So we have to be able to kind of work together with the technology is the idea. You can't just have a new phone and not be able to use it and say, I'm going to decrease crime, right? And then the last one I'm just going to mention, this was looking in West Germany from 77 to 2001. And this was about the probability of conviction versus that certainty of punishment. Or what type of punishment, severity, I think that's supposed to be. So during this time, the authorities in West Germany, they decided they were going to reduce conviction rates because they wanted to alleviate and lower prison costs. So we would, look at maybe low-level offenders and let them off. They weren't going to go to prison. All right, so our severity of punishment is going lower, and also our probability. So we might get caught, but we're not getting punished. So this did have an effect on crime rates. This policy probably led to an increase of crime. So we had more people committing crime because they knew they weren't going to be punished and they weren't going to jail. So altogether, though, they found that it was more about that certainty of punishment, actually going to jail and getting caught versus the severity. So even though you're not going to jail and your severity is very low, it was more about the probability of actually getting there. That was important. All right. So again, apologize for reading those. I don't think there was a good way to get through those pretty quickly, though. All right. So that's the end of chapter 2. Really just an introduction to empirical methods, dot regression, and then looking at the Grogger paper and some of these. Does anybody have any questions? Right, I'll be emailing you, remind you about the assignment and also about the reading with what I recommend you looking for and the sections to read. I hope you have a great weekend. Remember, we have the quiz on Monday during the first 15 minutes of class.